All right, we're back from break and we're going to finish up with the remaining slides that we have here um, in our chapter 2 lecture and demonstration. I was just telling the class right before I hit record that, even though there's not a lot of slides, there's kind of some heavy content here. I mean, in terms of being really important for the class. So I suggest that you pay close attention, especially when we get past this first slide here. Now, we learned a lot of different things, a lot of real basic tags, and a lot of ones that are really useful for basically getting words on the page, right? The heading tags, I think in particular, and the paragraph tags and line breaks and things like that, very, very useful. We learned about the ordered, unordered lists, definition lists, phrase elements, bold and italics, and all those types of things. And they're not really that hard to employ. And honestly, that's what's kind of cool about HTML. It doesn't really take much to figure out how to get it going, right? But as we kind of often say as a silly phrase, the devil's in the details, right? And coding is like that. Web work is especially like that, I think. But let's talk about this next category here, because we run into these really weird situations when we're creating websites. And I want you to think about this. If I was creating a website whose content was how to code HTML, I want you to think about this. If I wrote HTML as an example, how would that ever even make it to the screen? Because if I wrote a paragraph tag or a heading tag, that would turn into the tag and render on the page. Just kind of see what I mean? And the users don't see that. And so they have this whole special language that they've come up with called special characters for HTML that allow you to use all the extended character sets that are built into UTF-8, by the way, that's where it draws from, that we can't otherwise generate from the keyboard. And so they have some good examples here on the screen. So the first one is the copyright character, right? So you have some work you're putting on the screen, you want to copyright it. Well, there's no copyright key on my keyboard. I don't know about you guys, but there is a way. Oh yeah, thank you, sir. I should probably share my screen. That's right. The recording still has it, even though I wasn't sharing, and I apologize. But the copyright logo is not one that you find on your keyboard, right? So the only way to invoke it is by using this special approach that we'll see here to create the copyright code. And I'm going to show you this in just a second. The other one to consider is if you're trying to put an HTML tag on the screen, or you're trying to do a mathematical formula that has greater than or less than in it. If you use the bracket in your code, it'll try to be treated as a bracket, not as a greater than or less than. So it gets really convoluted. So you have to actually issue the code to get that on the screen. Another one is the ampersand symbol. This one sometimes actually works and sometimes doesn't. But the weirdest one maybe of all, maybe the most useful, is the last one here, which is the thing we call NBSP, or non-breaking space, technically, which creates what? A space. So before, when I was adding extra spaces between words, if I really wanted to do that on my page, the non-breaking space is a way to do it. All right, so that's kind of the overview of what special characters are, but this is kind of interesting. And for this, I go to a browser. I'm actually going to pull up Firefox here for this. Of course, I had this issue last week where it's coming in on the other screen. Okay, so the other screen that goes this way, that's not attached to my computer right now. So all right, back to Chrome, and I'll just make a new tab and pull it over. I'm gonna have to remember to fix that next time before I come here. And actually, there's a way to fix that without, but all right. So here's a new browser tab here that I'm opening. Let's make this full screen. And I'm gonna just type in HTML special characters. And the reason I pull this up is, well, W3 Schools is probably the best place to go for it, but let's see what this site has to say. So some of the real common ones, and notice, same ones that we were kind of looking at. So, well, here they have single quote, double quote, ampersand, greater than, less than. But what I want you to notice is I kind of start scrolling through their list, and this is, I think, kind of hard to see, honestly. That's a little better, right? So all these weird characters that you can invoke that you cannot type from your keyboard. Now I want you to notice we're also getting into Greek letters and mathematical symbols, actually really weird. Well, there's the actual Greek letters. And really what we're looking at is all the characters that are available in the UTF-8 character set are what we're pulling up on the screen here. So the stuff you cannot type from your keyboard, and really it goes on and on. Now, in order to get the stuff on the screen to display, you can use a combination of techniques. So the first technique is that you use the code number. So you use the ampersand symbol, and then usually a pound sign or some other character, and then a number, and it ends with a semicolon, right? And then this was kind of like the old school way that I learned. You'd have to learn the number. When they did, I think, XHTML and then HTML5, they decided that they could have like English-like names. So for example, if I wanted a quote, you could use QUOT, or an ampersand is amp, and a less than is LT, and a greater than is GT, right? And it's easier to remember, right? And so that's kind of helpful to know. But this is really kind of neat because in the era of like, emoticons and little symbols and stuff like that, you have ways to pull those weird characters in and include them. And that includes, like, okay, they showed some of the Greek letters, but you could like pull in Arabic symbols or Russian symbols or whatever. You just need to know the right codes. I'm thinking that maybe the W3 thing, like, so they have some, examples here again, that they probably have a complete reference here that's better, so they saw all the currency, arrows, symbols, etc., and they demonstrate all of it. So if you're looking for a special thing, like you want to do a registered trademark, the little R, that's, ampersand reg semicolon. All right, so we're just going to try a couple of these. But I think what's really kind of neat is we're kind of building a page here in our code. And as we build a page, we think about like how our page is structured. And it's not unusual at the very bottom of your page, like the footer of your page, to put a little copyright in. So you know what, let's do that. I don't want to just let it hang in midair though. So I do want to put it inside of a paragraph. So I'm going to create a paragraph down here, close that paragraph. And then inside the paragraph here, I'm going to do the special character code, which was ampersand, copy, that one's really easy, and then a semicolon. And then I'm putting in a space, and I'll put in the year, 2022, put in my name. Right, I can be a little funny here and say incorporated, or whatever. And then usually you say all rights reserved, yada, yada, yada. All right, let's save this and take a look really quick and see what happens on the output side. So back to the browser. I got to get the right browser over here. And here's our page. I think our page. Here's our page. Control R to refresh, and I'm scrolling down to the bottom. And here's my little copyright symbol. Pretty cool, right? That's a pretty useful one and not a bad one to include on your website, especially if you create original content or shoot photographs or anything like that. Kind of the unwritten rule of the internet is that people can easily grab your content. And unless you copyright it somehow, and all a copyright takes is exactly what I just did. Who created it, when it was created, and that you're reserving all the rights. And if you do give permission, specify how, but otherwise it's stealing. And then you can hire your lawyer to hunt them down or whatever, better call Saul, if you want to make a joke about it. You don't do that. You don't claim the rights over your stuff. It still doesn't mean you don't have rights, but it makes it a lot easier for people to proceed stealing your content. And by the way, that's really uncool, right? So don't do it. But the copyright symbol is a really simplistic way if you have original content. So that's at the bottom of my page. Another one that we should probably demonstrate, the less than and greater than symbols, okay, I think you get those. The ampersand's kind of a weird one, but that one's always recommended that you do put in the ampersand code, and here's the why for this one. because you notice that all of these special codes begin with what character? Ampersand, right? So whenever you put that in, and if you mistakenly put the wrong letters right next to it without a space, you might get a special character instead of the ampersand. So whenever you're doing an ampersand, it's considered good to actually type this out as like that to get it correct. I will demonstrate this one, the non-breaking space, because I think it's particularly useful in a number of different capacities, and one that you'll probably use most often. Now, I'm going to do kind of a weird thing here because we have our House of the Dragon, winter is still coming, and then we go into the text. But I'm thinking that if I was making a real website, right below those two titles is where I might put my menu for navigation. So here I am planning ahead, right? So I'm thinking to myself, at some point, now I haven't done this yet, right? For now, I'm gonna make this, maybe I'll make it an H3, and I am gonna change this, and you know, maybe I won't even do that. Maybe I'm just gonna make this a paragraph. And the reason I'm doing this in a paragraph, real frankly, is because it's never good to put text on a web page without being inside of a structure, right? I do plan on changing the paragraph tag later. And inside here, I'm like, what would a menu look like? Well, I would have like home, right? And then I might have like about, you know, gallery, store, video, you know, think of like stuff that goes on a web page, right? FAQ, something like that. But I'm gonna just have two pages for now, a home page and an about page. And I don't want them to sit right next to each other. I do want some space. And I already learned that if I do this, that's not gonna do anything, right? But if I add, okay, so the non-breaking space is ampersand, NBSP semicolon. All of those characters create one space. So if I want 5 spaces, I have to copy paste that 5 times. So I'm going to copy and then paste, paste, paste. Now, chances are that menu, I'll probably make it bold. So I'm going to put in bold tags at the beginning and bold tags at the end. Notice how I'm nesting them properly. The closing bold tag is inside the paragraph. If I would to take that and move it here, that makes it incorrect, by the way. Right, I'm going to put it here. Let's save this, take a look really quick in the browser. Here's my browser window, scroll to the top, Control R to refresh. And okay, so it doesn't look great, but you can kind of see, like if I start adding more stuff and style it a little bit, maybe give it a background, all of a sudden I have a menu, right? It's not a bad idea to plan ahead. All right, but here I am able now with the non-breaking space to add those extra spaces where otherwise I would just have the one, but all that was added with non-breaking spaces. Simple, highly effective. Let's move past the special characters. Now let's start to talk about a structural element, and this is a really important one, called the div. A div is really kind of a very polite way to say it, is a generic structure in HTML. It's really what it is. So it's not a paragraph, it's not a heading, it's here's a container, put whatever you want in it. And you know, in the days where I learned how to kind of do this professionally, I use divs a lot, right? Because I learned from other people that would use divs a lot. And divs don't have any inherent styles attached to them. So it's kind of weird. You know, they don't like give you extra space above and below like a paragraph does. It doesn't make the text bigger or bolder or italic or anything like that. It's just a generic holder. And I can put whatever I want in it. But how a div is typically used is like this. So here what we have is what I would call a very rough wireframe of a web page, and a very typical kind of layout, right? So think about when you go to a web page, often at the very top of the page is like the branding and the logo. You might even have some graphics up there, or whatnot, maybe information about the business if that's what it is. And then usually right below it, or maybe above, it depends, horizontally, we find our navigation bar or our menu, right? And that's where our eyes are trained to look there. It's kind of the normal layout for a page. And then at the very bottom of the page, we often will have like a footer, like the copyright or contact info, or maybe it's some email addresses or something like that, right? And typically the header, the navigation, and the footer are repeating items on every page. You know, why? Because it looks consistent. It looks good that way, right? Got the same header, nav, and footer on every page. Then what happens is we have kind of the meat of the page, where the actual stuff is that we're looking at is in what they call the main section, and that's actually a tag in HTML called main, right? And then we will create little boxes, and they don't necessarily have to be sitting next to each other like this. They could be on top of each other, wherever, where we put in content. What's the content? I don't know. Could be a picture, could be a video, could be words, right? But it's our holder. Okay, so now why is this all important? Prior to HTML5, the way that we would do a web page was like this. If I wanted to create a web page with this structure, which is really common, I would create a div and I would add a little attribute to it that would say ID header, right? Okay, so div ID header. What's going to go in there? The header. And then I would create another div ID nav. What for? The menu, navigation. And then, so all of these things, so what they basically did is professionals were doing that a lot because everybody was doing it and we would borrow from each other, and it was a good idea because it's good to label your header and know where it is, and that way when you're styling it or controlling it, I mean, you know what you're dealing with, right? And then they discovered that, well, if so many people are doing this so routinely, all the developers are doing a div ID header, why don't we just create a tag called header and be done with it, and a tag called nav and be done with it, and a tag called footer and main and be done with it. And that's exactly what they did. So with HTML5, they introduced the header tag, the nav tag, the main tag, and the footer tag, and they call these structural elements, but they kept the div also for more generic structures where you still don't know what's going in there, but you can put it in there. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'd like to restructure my page so that it fits this format. That's kind of the whole grand point of this. And when you see and you keep this kind of image in your head of what you're trying to create, that's what we're trying to do with the code. So we can do that very simply by creating those tags. And really, since we already have content, all I have to do is wrap those tags around my content, you know, and I'm most of the way there. And we follow the structure. Really, really key, all right? Because I get a lot of people that miss this part. The header, nav, main, footer, all that stuff is still in the visible part of the page, should still go inside the body tags. So you notice inside the body tags. Real common mistake that people make both on the case studies and this first assignment is they'll take the header and put it in the head of the document. And that's one confusion that I want to kind of dispel up front. Don't do that, you know? So let's go ahead and do this restructuring. It's really not that hard to do, by the way. So I'm going to switch back over to my code. I'm going to go full screen here on this so we have as much screen real estate as possible. And I'm also going to zoom out a little bit because I think it's kind of appropriate. Right, so here's the entirety of our page. Take care. Now, the parts that I would see as the header part of my document, for me, are going to be these two lines up here. So I'm going to create a blank line above. I'm going to type in opening header tag. And then I'm going to get a blank line below closing header tag. So now the two headings are inside the header, inside the body. If this helps you, and for me it always does, I think Visual Studio Code might auto indent, but with Notepad++, I want you to notice I just highlighted these two lines, and then I hit the tab key, indents both of them at the same time. Killer feature, by the way. But that way I can see that structure, just like kind of like in the PowerPoint, my H1 and 2 are inside there. That's kind of what I just did. Right. I already kind of figured out this is going to be my navigation. So let's set that up. So here I will create a nav tag. Below this silly paragraph, I will create a closing nav tag. And then the stuff in the middle of it, this stuff, I'm going to, oops, I don't want to get rid of it. I just want to tab it in so I can see that it's inside of it. The indenting is really, I'm just going to repeat this. The indenting is optional. It's for our eyes, not for the computer. But for me, it helps. Okay, so we have the header, the nav. And if we looked at that document again, we'll notice the next major section is the main section. So right below the nav, I'm going to create an opening main tag. And then way down, I'm going to go way down to the bottom here, right above my copyright, I'm going to close my main tag. And then everything in between, I'm going to highlight the whole block of all that code, and I'm going to hit the tab key, it indents all of it. Once again, to help my eyes see it. Right? Opening and closing header tags with the two headings. The navigation structure, whatever that happens to be. The main structure, and you can see that goes all the way down here. And then we have one structure left to add, and that is the footer. So down here, I'm adding a footer tag. Going below the copyright paragraph, but above the body tag, closing the footer. Gotta spell it correctly though. And then I will once again indent my content for the benefit of my own eyes. All right, so now we have, folks, and I'm going to get rid of a little bit of the white space in my document. That will maybe hopefully help us see things a little better. That's not too bad, but I'm going to kind of like zoom way out on purpose. Not that you can read this, but I want you to see like the hierarchy and how this makes it kind of easy to see. So I have the body section holds all the visible elements, the header, the nav, the main, and the footer. Okay, so page is basically structured. And if you think about it, once we have our navigation set and our header set and our footer set, we'll never really be changing the header and nav or the footer. All we're really going to change is the stuff that's in between the main. So if I was to create another page, I can duplicate this whole page, delete the stuff in the main section, and create new content, right? And it's really cool. All right, so let's go ahead and do a save on this. So Control S to save. And then let's go back to the browser and take a look. And I want you to notice that as I refresh here, this is really kind of cool. Like nothing changed. But, okay, right click view source. Now we have a structure that we can build on. And here's why this is important. When we're putting stuff into containers that group them together, I can now take that structure and style it independently of other structures or put code on it independently of other structures. So for example, like if I go to a lot of websites, the header has usually got like a background, the logo, some images or whatever, whatever the thing is. And that's kind of all on its own. And if I can control that separately, it gives me significantly more individual control over the other things on the page. So I could set a different font for the header with one command or a different color or whatever. And it's really important in terms of design. Now this other piece, the div, let's go back to the div thing, right? So they talked about the div element as a generic block level item. The div is used for whatever content we kind of can't necessarily categorize into something else. I'm just going to kind of come up with a silly idea here for my code, but maybe up here, like right below the block quote, I can throw in a div, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see this. Sorry about that. So I'm going to create a div, and what do I do right away? Close the div immediately. Now, usually a div, because it is so generic, it's always a good idea to put a name on it. So you can either put a class name or an ID. I prefer an ID typically. So I'm going to say ID equals, and let's just say characters. I'm going to call it characters. So what am I going to put inside here? Maybe a list of characters or pictures of characters. I don't know yet, right? And I'm just going to type some words. I'm going to put info about the characters here, right? Just whatever. Let's save this and then let's take a look. And this is more to show you that it has no impact on the output when so this is going to appear like right in here. Here's the refresh. And it really looks kind of like a plain paragraph. What you can't really tell from this is if I had like 3 or 4 divs in a row, there's no spaces in between them. Okay. I will typically also say that with a div, that's not really a great container for text straight up. You can totally do it, but it's not really a good container for text straight up. And I think that the ID on a div is critical. In fact, often when I am creating divs, because they're generic things, and sometimes you create a div where you start way up at the top of the page and then close it way down at the bottom of the page, you forget, like, what does this closing div go with? So here's, Jamie, here's where I introduce my comments, is I usually put a comment, like, and they go like this. So it's an exclamation dash dash, and I'm gonna say this is a comment, right? And then dash dash to close. And that, notice how it turned green? That is text that will not render on the page. So I'm going to save back to the browser here, refresh, watch the words that I have highlighted. Nothing added there, right? That's hidden. We only see that. All right. So why do I use the comments? For me, whenever I'm doing a div and I'm closing it, I usually put a comment at the end that says closes, characters. Because here's what happened to me in the old days. I would everything would be in a div, and I'd have 50 of them on a page, and I never knew which closing div was attributed to the one that opened. So whenever I open and close them, I would do this, and that way I could at least keep track. That's just a practical tip. You don't have to do that, by the way. All right, let's do something kind of interesting now, and I'm going to kind of jump back to the PowerPoint here just as a guide, just to review what we did. So we learned about the generic placeholder for block level elements called div, how HTML5 structural elements kind of evolved and how we use them in a real typical kind of common day-to-day approach. Very common web page structure, by the way. Here's how it looks in tags, and we converted all of our content to fit inside those tags. Didn't change anything on the page, but we have the structure now. And then from here we go to learning about what makes the web special. But before we make the web special, we are going to create a second page because we need to have something to link to. So here's what we're going to do. All right. So do this one of 2 different ways. You could take this document and do a save as. That's one approach, right? Or you can do a Control A inside the document, a Control A or Option A on a Mac, selects all the text, Control C to copy, and then just create a new document. Go ahead and do that. What do you do first? Save as. And let's put it in the same folder, and we're going to call this is going to be my about page. So I'm going to call it about.html. Saving it, and I'm going to paste in all the code. But if you heard carefully what I said before, the header is going to be the same, the nav is going to be the same. I'm going to change all the stuff in the main content area. So I'm going to take everything in main, all of it, every last little bit of it, and blow it away, but not the main tags. So now I'm left with that really basic structure. And by the way, once I have my heading and my navigation and my footer set, and I want to create 20 pages for a site, I would just replicate this over and over again. And you have the starter for all your pages, right? Depending on what you're doing, right? Right, so here's my second page called About. I got rid of the excess content. I do want to put something in the middle here just so I know what I'm looking at. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in a paragraph and just say, this is the About page, I don't know, coming soon. Close that paragraph. And I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to go back to my browser now. And up here in the address bar, where we're looking at our already open page, I'm going to change the last part, index.html, to say about.html. And did it come up correctly? It did. So notice, even though ugly, whatever, here's my heading 1, heading 2, that's my header, right? This is my nav that I'm still building. That's my footer, and this is the main content area, which is mostly empty, but the structure is there. Okay, so now we move on to the last and probably most important part of this class, because what's kind of bizarre about this is so far we're just really document creating. We're not doing anything more special than like working in a word processor. We're just putting it in a browser, right? But what made the web the killer feature of the web was the ability to link to other resources dynamically. And that's what we're going to learn next. What's so strange about this, frankly, is why they call it what they call it, because they don't call it the link tag, right? Which you would think, right? Let's put in a link, all right? So, but the name of the tag is the anchor tag, and we use the letter A. I don't know why, but that's what they chose, so we go with it, right? So somebody thought, well, we have little anchors on pages, and we can navigate to those anchors. That, I think, kind of the mindset. But what's fascinating about the link, and I want you to look at this structure here, because you're gonna, this is something you'll memorize pretty quickly, is we use the anchor tag and we add to it an attribute in the form of a href, which stands for hypertext reference, or what is it you're linking to. We put in an equal sign and then double quotes, and inside those double quotes is the URL to the resource that we are looking for. So it could be NFL.com, right? But if I'm going to an external website, I have to type in the whole URL. I can't just say NFL.com. I have to say http://NFL.com. Then that would work. Without the HTTP, it won't work. Here you see an example where they're linking to another page, and when you don't see any stuff in front of the file name, like HTTP or a bunch of slashes and folder names and stuff, this implies that the file is in the same folder. And most of the time when you're doing a website, you're linking to your own pages, and they're usually inside the same folder. So this is the syntax we use. So whenever you want to hit a page that's also in the same folder structure, you just have to put in the page name. I want you to think about, there's a few reasons why this is really smart. If I move my folder from my computer to the server, I don't have to change anything because it's still in the same folder, right? If I move from the one web server to the other web server that's got a different URL, I have to change a thing, it's still in the same folder, right? So it's really clever. This is called relative linking, by the way. We're linking relative to the location of the document we're currently in to another document in the same folder. We just call the document directly. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build links for our navigation. So I want you to watch how I'm doing this. I'm going to take this nav structure and I'm going to kind of move the closing and opening tags away from the content, right? And I have all these like non-breaking spaces and stuff in there. I'm just going to kind of put that on its own line. I know it looks really goofy, but this is the way I would do it, right? So here's the words that we want to link up. So what we do with these is let's indent first. Let's move this all in. So there's the indent. And I want to link to the home page. Well, if I want to link to the home page, I'm going to put in an A tag, an anchor tag, href, all lowercase, equals, and what's the file name of the home page? Right? Pretty easy. Index.html, all lowercase. I don't have to look it up. Right? I just know that one. And then after the word home, I'm going to put the closing anchor tag. So home will become a link. Now this is really kind of interesting because whatever's between the anchor tags is the linkable item, right? In this case, it's words. But I could also put, I don't know, image in there that you can link from, or a whole structure of HTML that I can link from. It doesn't have to be a word, right? Most typically words or images is what we see. So whatever goes in between the anchor tags becomes the link. I'm going to do the same thing with the about page. Let's just repeat that. We're going to do href equals about dot HTML, because that's the exact file name. Notice all lowercase. I don't have to guess because that's my naming convention, right? Close the anchor tag. All right. Now, if I made the change to one page, right, this is on the about page, mind you, I'm going to save my changes, but I'm going to take that whole structure. In fact, I'm just going to save myself a little time, just kind of grab all of that. So I'm going to replace the paragraph and bold tags. I'm going to come back to here where I have basically the same thing, and I'm going to paste in that structure. That indented, I don't like it, so I'm going to fix it. And actually, they could all come back one level, right? There. I'm going to do a Control S to save. And now I'm going to switch back to my page. So let's go back to the first page. And I want you to notice now what happened to the navigation links. They are now underlined and they're purple, meaning they have been visited. So this is the default for HTML. If I hover over the name of the file, or excuse me, the link, notice how at the bottom of my screen here, it shows me what I'm linking to, and it shows that I'm linking to my G drive, my folder, blah, 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 right to the index file. Now I'm already on the home page, so I won't see anything really if I click on the home page. But if I click on the about page, I'm now going to the about page. Now that I'm in the about page and click home, I can go back to home. This is really simplistic, you guys, right? But this is part of the assignment also, to create a second page. Second page, it doesn't need to be anything fancy at this point, to be able to go to it and then come back, right? So really, really kind of important steps here. And so let's take a look at this anchor tag thing again, right? So if you are putting in your anchor tag and closing it, your link text goes in between the tags. Your attribute, the href attribute, hypertext reference, is the name of the file in the same folder, spelled exactly as it is in on the file, to get to the link. If you are using what we call relative and absolute, so a relative link like this index one down here is relative to other stuff in the same folder or to the location of the file on the server, right? So if it happened to be in a couple folders deep, you could still navigate to it. An absolute link will include the complete web address, including the HTTP. All right, so if that's something you want to try, that's something we, in fact, let's go ahead and do one of those. Maybe I want to tip my hat to HBO. So maybe on the about page, I could put a little thing here. Check it out on the HBO website, and I can just link them right to HBO Max or something like that. So let's do that. So I'm going to bring up the code for my about page, and then here in the main section, I'm just going to do a new paragraph and say, if you love this show or want to learn more, visit, so here starts my anchor tag, href equals, I'm putting it, I don't know what it's going to be actual link yet, we'll figure it out, and close the tag like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go hunting. So I'm going to go to my browser and I'm going to type in HBO Max. That's fine. We'll go to their main homepage. I'm just going to copy their URL, come back over to my code and paste it in right inside the double quotes there. So notice it's an HTTPS, www.hbomax.com. And then what words do I want to put in here? I'm just going to put HBO Max, like that. And those are the words that become the highlight. I'm going to do Control S to save. And then I'm going back to my browser, folks, wherever it is. Got so many tabs open, I'm losing my spot. And let's refresh the About page, and there it is, right? And notice as I hover, look at the bottom part of the screen down here. As I hover, how it brings up the web address. That's also a trick, I don't know if you guys know that. It's also a trick to not click on bad stuff on the internet, is to see where it's taking you before you click on it. Like if it's really cryptic looking and you're suspicious, don't, you know? But if this is going to HBO Max, not a big deal. I'm gonna click on it, and now you can see that it works. So here we are linking to an external website. And I think that's pretty helpful and perfect graphics, right, for what we're doing. So, and then that's one of the reasons why it's kind of good to build it around a topic, once again, because you have cool stuff you can draw from. All right, I'm going to finish off the little lecture stuff here, and then almost done, right? Just a couple things to think about. One real handy thing to add also to a website is this ability to add an anchor link that launches your email client. This is kind of a weird one. And I have some opinions about this that maybe don't match the mainstream. And I think that typically this is not a great idea on a website for a number of different reasons, but I do want to show you how to do it. So let's go ahead and follow what they're doing here. So maybe on the footer of all my pages, I might want to have like a separate paragraph where I say, email me, you know? Okay, email the site creators at, and then I'm going to do my link, href equals, and then the command is mail to, no spaces in there, and then a colon, and then you put in your email address. So for example, here's my gateway email address. And then I'm going to close the double quotes and the bracket, and then what text do I want to show them? And I'm going to argue the best text to show is the actual email address. You know, that would be my argument on this. So I'm going to put that in. And then I'm going to close my anchor tag. Right? And close my paragraph, which I did not do before. See, that's why you want to close and open your paragraph right away, because I could have forgot. All right, so save it. Control S. Now that's on the one page, but not on the other page. So this is on the About page. I'm gonna add the same thing to the home page. I want my pages to be consistent. So I'm just copying that line, and now it's on the home page too. Back over to the browser. Wherever that is, here it is. I think maybe I have to go back here. Okay, so here's the page. Now you can see the email address. Right? It's on the home page as well, way at the bottom. And if I click on it, watch what happens. And this is pretty interesting. This will depend on your operating system, by the way, right? So if you're on the Mac OS, it'll probably try to open the Mac Mail client. If you're on Windows, it'll try to open the Windows Mail client. If you are on a Chromebook, it might try to open Chrome. Or in the worst case scenario, it'll ask you which program is your email client. I am not a really huge fan of this, but it does successfully launch the email client, begin a new email with the address of the recipient already populated for you. Now, why this is good and bad? I want you to think about this. How many of you who use Windows use the Windows built-in mail client? I can answer that for you. Just about nobody, right? Very few people really do that because most people are going to go right to Gmail or Yahoo or whatever their thing is and just use that, right? So if you're doing that, you're kind of, those people are going to miss out. And unfortunately, I think those are most of the people, right? So you see like where that can be kind of weird. This tends to work better on a phone if you have an email client installed. And there's some other really kind of neat little tricks that you can do like that too. This is not a bad idea. I always think it's a good idea to put the email in plain text also, because if somebody is a Gmail person, they could just come in here, right click, copy, or right click, copy email address, and then go to Gmail and paste it in and be okay, right? So I see kind of like mixed usage for that particular link, but it's a cool one to know for sure. So that's an email hyperlink. As we start to kind of build out our websites, and this is kind of where we go next, when you're thinking about the site that you're going to build as a project, you need to kind of start looking down the road a little bit. It's like, all right, well, I'm doing a TV show, so I kind of know what kind of stuff I might put on there. But if I'm doing like a, I don't know, travel website or a guitar website or whatever, I might have very different goals and envision very different pages. And what helps a lot when you're designing your navigation is to think in advance of like what pages you're going to create, and you can pre-create the navigation. You know, so that's kind of an interesting thought. So I'll give you guys just one more tip here before we kind of like stop the main coding for the day. And that is like, let's say I wanted to add another navigation item. And I'll add this to both pages, and I'm just gonna guess here. So I'm gonna add the spaces in between and copy one of the links, and I'm just gonna tweak it. Why retype, you know? Maybe one of the pages I will have will be contact. I'll have a contact page, right? I can pre-name it, and then I can say here, contact. Okay, so I'm gonna save this, go back to the browser and run it. And of course, when I take a look at this right here, so here's the refresh and there's the contact link. And notice how that one's blue because I haven't gone there yet, right? And looks like it's clickable, so I'm gonna click it, and what happens? Nothing happens because the file doesn't exist, right? And so when you do a live website, you don't want to do this. You don't want to have people go to nowhere, right? So one little trick that I learned is until you build the page, what you can put here as a link is just simply a pound sign, right? And then the pound sign declares a blank in-page anchor is really what it is, and it will behave like a link. You can click it, but it doesn't go anywhere. But it doesn't also confuse your users and break the page, right? So, yeah, exactly. File not found, exactly. So that's a really handy little tip. Now, I'm gonna also do a quick look here at our assignment description in the course shell. So, and the reason I do this is all the stuff that we just did here in class in the series of these videos helps you to complete this HTML basics assignment, right? So I want you to look at like all the stuff in here, and if you've been following along, you pretty much have done all of this already. Your assignment's kind of done, you know? So it's like, all right, create the web pages using the criteria detailed below. All right, so read all the criteria. Create a folder, did it. Inside that folder, create a plain text file named index.html. Got it, all lowercase, right? Create a basic page structure, it's shown in your book, yada, yada, yada. We just did that, right? Header, nav, main, footer, that structure. And then I want you to go through and demonstrate these tags, right? So paragraphs, headings, line breaks, ULs, OLs, DLs, block quotes, bold italics, some of the phrase elements, empty spaces with the non-breaking space, we did all that stuff. Link to an external website, HBO Max, right? Link to a relative page, about page and back. An email one, oh, there's one that we didn't do, which is back to the top. So I'll show you how to do that one. And then you create a second page, give it a different name, and so you can link back and forth. And then finally, you're gonna validate your code. So we're just about done with the whole assignment. So you see like where we took all this here today. All right, so let's do that last bullet point, because I think this is kind of an interesting one. And it demonstrates this concept of what we call the in-page anchor, where anchor tags originally came from. So way at the bottom of my page. And in fact, I'm going to do it actually right, not in the footer, but right before the main section ends. I'm going to put in a link here. So href equals, and then inside the double quotes, # top. And then I'll just say back to top. Close my link. And this format, this is kind of interesting. # top, this is an automatic one. So it's built into the browser. The browser knows that if we have a link that says # top, go to the top of the page. Right now on our About page, this would not be very useful because there's kind of like not much of a bottom to it. But on the main page, this is pretty useful. So let's save this and let's take a look and you'll see what it does. So in the browser, we will now look at, let's see here. Okay, so here it is. And notice I have my back to top thing. And when I click on it, it takes me to the top of the page. So really only useful if you have a lot of content and you want to quickly go back up to the top. Other ways that this can be used, and you can experiment with this all you want, is if you have something on the page, like a div typically, that has an ID attached to it, you can navigate directly to the start of that ID. So once again, this would be particularly useful if you had a really long page, and let's just say I had like 5 sections on the page and I wanted to jump right from the first section to the 5th section. I could do an in-page anchor attached to the ID name of that 5th object and jump right to it, right? A lot of people don't use those these days so much because I think more people create shorter pages rather than long pages, but the back to top is useful. So that's a really easy one to do. Once again, the code for that, is right here. It's also in the assignment description. All right, so the last piece that we have to do now to fulfill that assignment is to validate our code. And what we'll do is we'll validate, you guys, and then we will take another break before we move forward. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do the validation piece, because I think this is kind of fun and interesting. Back in our core shell, right here, if you scroll up to the top in the topic list, I gave you that link before from W3, where it's validator.w3.org. And like I said, what I typically do is I don't memorize that at all or bookmark it. I just start typing validate, and that's what comes up, at least for me, right? You might have to type it all the way out. So it's validator.w3.org, and it brings you here. Okay. Here's what's interesting about this. 3 different methods for validating your code. And I'm not a huge fan of all of them, by the way. So the first one is, if this is on a server, I can just drop the URL in right here, and it'll check it, how it is online. Okay. Right, so there are times where that is useful. So if you're working on a system that gives you output HTML from backend code, that's particularly useful. For what we're doing, it's not. The other way is you can take your file and upload it. So in other words, I can go in here, find the file, click on it, open it, and send it to the server. My preferred way, real frankly, is the third way, the third tab at the top. I just go to my code editor, I do a Control A or Option A to select all, Control C or Option C to copy, and then just bring it over here and paste it into the window, and then I'm ready to check. And so before I hit the button, right? Now, I've been doing this for a while, so sometimes I get really lucky and everything I type is perfect and correct, right? Because that's just how I am as a human, right? I'm perfect and correct always, right? Not at all, right? So if you think it's all correct, nothing's like highlighting in your tool, what you guys will notice is some of your tools, and I think Visual Studio Code does this more than Notepad++, will show you when you have mistakes as you're making them, and highlight things in red for you to fix them, and they usually catch them. But when you're using a more primitive editor, sometimes you don't catch it, or sometimes your tool doesn't catch it. I'm going to go ahead and hit the check button, and hopefully I got all right, so checked all my code. How do you like that? I'm batting 1,000 here already, right? No errors or warnings. So ideally you won't run it, and that's what you get. Okay, but that's not what you guys will probably end up with, because if it's the first time you're doing this, more often than not, you're going to make a mistake. So let's just do something goofy just to break it on purpose. All right, so here's some code in here. What if, all right, so I'm going to give you an example. What if I was missing the closing H2 tag here, right? And then I'm going to scroll down a little ways, and maybe on this paragraph, I forgot the closing slash. Just 2 mistakes, right? That's all I just did, 2 mistakes. Now I'm going to hit the check button, and then you might get something like this, right? And I want you to notice, well, it only found 2 errors. That's actually pretty unusual. But here's what happens. Sometimes you make 1 error, and that first error will create 10 more. And this is the perplexing thing. So when it comes to fixing the errors, don't fix the bottom one first, always fix the top one first, because the bottom ones might be the result of the top one, and it's not going to be the other way around. So that's a really big helpful tip. All right, so when we are doing the validation, and I think this is pretty fascinating as well, it will say from line 11, column 3 to line 11, column 11, it says end tag header scene, but there were open elements. Okay, so I don't get what that means, but if I look at my code, and this is kind of interesting, I don't have any line numbers here, but if I was looking at my code here, the line numbers correspond, right? So it's saying it's looking here and it's finding a closing header tag, but it said there were open elements. And what I had done, if you remember, is I removed this. So really what it's trying to tell me is like you're missing the H2, and it's kind of cryptic speak. So what I would do here is I would look for the closing header tag, and then I'd go up a little ways and see what's missing, and I see the closing H2 is missing, and I can put it in, and then I can hit check again, and then hopefully it has 1 less error to contend with. Well, now it says no errors or warnings. Well, isn't that interesting? But I know there's an error, right? What was the other error? I never closed this paragraph here. I think that's pretty fascinating that it didn't catch that. So is it 100% foolproof? I just proved it's not. Right, okay. Let's go ahead and fix that. Now I'm gonna say that your editor should probably catch that it's not closed. But let's go ahead and fix that. You guys might be getting way different error messages. Is anybody running it right now and getting like bizarre ones?
I tried it with the first one.
Okay.
The one with you put.
All right, welcome back everybody. We just kind of finished up our PowerPoint and all our demonstration of the HTML5 basics assignment and how to complete that, including the validation portions of it. And I want to point out a couple of things that I think are kind of important here in terms of how we're turning in the homework. So the first thing is, with this HTML5 basics, I always tell people, make sure you read what the assignment is. I mean, I don't put the stuff in here for no reason. I can also make mistakes, so sometimes I transition from one semester to another and forget to update the wording or something like that. So if you ever spot any typos or are not clear, just let me know because I can fix it. It's not a big deal. But once you have everything all complete, so you completed all these tasks, right? It says, when complete, submit a working link in Blackboard's right submission area Make sure you test that link before sending. As a backup, you can also zip your entire folder that contains your work, and there should be a folder with 2 files, and upload the zip using the blue assignment link above. All right. So I guess I'm kind of waffling on my words here because I didn't think I was requiring it here, but I guess I am, that you upload this all to Apollo, and I'm going to show you what I think is the best approach for doing this. Now, we have one folder that contains 2 files, and we're going to have to FTP it, right? And then we're going to have to make sure that that link works. So I'm going to just demonstrate that whole process. And for me, I'm going to go back to my folder where the work is. So here are the 2 files. I do want to make sure that whatever editor I'm using, that my files are saved. So in Notepad++, I know they're saved because the icons are blue. And then in Visual Studio Code, I know it's saved because the icon's not a circle. So you Control S and the circle goes away, right? Depending on which program you're using. And then we got to bring up our FTP program. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up FileZilla. I'm going to connect to Prometheus using my account. And I don't want to install a new version right now, maybe later. So I'm going to type prometheus.gtc.edu. I'm putting in my username and my password and connecting to the server. Now, if you guys heard me last week, I suggested that you start creating a folder structure in here. So it would be a great idea if you had a folder for web programming. You can see I created one called Web Prog. And then inside there, I had already created a Unit 2 folder. How preemptive of me. Now I have a new folder that I want to put in here. So what I'm going to do is on my file system, which is on the left side of the screen here, I'm going to navigate to my G drive where I put my stuff. Now for you guys, you need to find where your stuff is. If you're in Windows, you go to Windows, then go to your users folder, then find your user account, and then find Documents or OneDrive or Desktop or wherever you put it, right? That's on you. But for me, since I'm using my G drive, it's in here. So I know where I keep my stuff, and I find that stuff. Let's see, right here. And there's my Unit 2 folder, and then I just did the HTML basics assignment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that one over and drop it in the Unit 2 folder. How do I know I'm in the Unit 2 folder here? Because it says so right there, right? So it shows which one's highlighted. I'm going to drag that whole folder in like so. Now, not that I don't trust that the file's transferred, but hey, let's take a look. I'm going to double click. There they are, right? And you can see those, I created them today, just a little while ago. Perfect. Right. Now the trick is getting to those folders, or those files, excuse me, and see if they work. And I'm going to give you a handy little tip here. If you forget how to get to the server path of where the stuff is on Prometheus, you can kind of borrow this little link here somewhat. Notice how it has my folder structure in there. So I'm actually going to copy it, Control C. And then I'm going to go to my web browser. That's not a browser. This is a browser, right? There we are. And in the browser, I'm going to type prometheus.gtc.edu. I'm going to / and then my account name, and I'm using my A account. And then at the end here, I'm going to paste in that folder path, and I want you to notice username, folder, folder, folder. I'm not even putting index.html. Why? Because index loads up automatically. So if it's in the right place and everything is named correctly, I should be able to pull up my work. So it is now on Apollo, and I can test. I can go to About, right? And I can go back to Home, and it looks like it all worked. Now that it worked, let me go ahead and highlight the URL. I'm going to copy it. And you guys, I don't know if you remember this tip or trick. Open up a new tab, paste in the link, and make sure it works. For as silly as that is, please do it, right? Now I'm going to go to Blackboard to turn it in. So here for the assignment, I'm going to click the assignment title, right? Review all the instructions and the due date, and then I'm going to hit the Write Submission button. I may expand the toolbar because I think that's helpful to see the link tool. Then I'm going to paste in my link with a Control V. It automatically is turning it into the link. If you're bringing in a link, it should. If it doesn't, for whatever reason, like turn into a web link, click anywhere in the middle of the link, then click the chain link and look at what the settings are and see if the URL is correct. Now, I also suggest, if you could, to switch this to new window, because that helps me for grading. That leaves my grade book open and the page open somewhere else. So I'm going to say save. And then if you want to type me some words, you can either add them, here. You can, oh, isn't that interesting how it changed the link to house? So I picked up the title from my page and changed the link. Very slick. Or I could type some stuff down here. Either way. If you want to make a backup copy of your work, this is not an obligation, but I'm just going to kind of put it out there as maybe a good practice. So like, just think about the fact, let's say you're working on a laptop, you go to a coffee shop or something, you go to the bathroom, come out, your laptop's gone, and all your work was on it. Bad scenario, but it does happen to people. Wouldn't it be nice to have a backup of your files if you're not putting them in the cloud? So what you could do in your file folder is wherever you're storing this stuff, you could go up one folder level so you can see the folder, and then you can right-click that folder, and then notice that this is Windows 11. There's an option here, compress to zip file. In Windows 10, you do, I think it's send to compress zip file, and turn it into a zip file, and then you can submit that zip file up here, and then you have a backup copy. So it's pretty handy because you turn it into me, your computer blows up or somebody steals it, you can email me and go, hey, you still have my Unit 2 assignment? Oh, thanks, man, somebody stole my laptop. So it creates a backup there. The zip file is optional if you read the instructions correctly. Providing the link is not, so you have to do that part of it, right? When you're all done, hit submit. I will get it on my end, check your link, check your code, and give you a bunch of comments. Here's what I will tell you with some of these early assignments. I go through them pretty detailed, right? And wherever I see little problems, I'm going to let you know. And I will also give you the opportunity to fix stuff, provided you're turning it in on time, or you're really close or something, you know what I mean? So you're going to get a chance to fix it if it's not perfect, right? This is kind of sort of flying by the seat of your pants. I mean, because you don't really have an example to work from, whereas with the case studies you will, right? Probably the best example you'll have is my version of the work. In the weeks coming, I will take whatever sample work that I do, including the stuff I did today, and I will post it to my own personal website on Prometheus so you can review it and take a look at what I did to remember, right? And watch the videos and see the output. And I think that's pretty helpful as you go. All right, so that's how you submit the homework. Any questions on submitting the homework? You guys good? All right.
I'll submit. And I tested that.
When you're looking for these case studies, you have to know where to look. And typically what we say is that they're at the end of each chapter. So you go to the very end, and I have an ebook, right? So like usually you go to where the summary is, and then you can see here how they have a bunch of exercises and review questions. And then at the very end, the case studies. So these are all case studies: Java Jam, Fish Creek, Pacific Trails, and Path of Light. Now, my postings on Blackboard might say differently, but you can choose any of these case studies to work on. They're all kind of functionally equivalent. You end up with different looking websites at the end, but you learn all the same materials. So you can do Java Jam, Fish Creek, Pacific Trails, or Path of Light, any one of those, whichever one you choose. But whichever one you choose, you're probably going to be sticking with it the whole time, right? So I'm going to go to Java Jam because that's the one that people do most often, probably because it's first. Show you kind of the anatomy of how they do it. So they come in and they talk about the scenario. So they talk about this, hey, there's this guy, he's got a coffee shop and he wants to build a simple web page. He's got an idea for how to put the page or the site together. So like what pages he might have. So a home page, a menu, music, and jobs. He's kind of got a wireframe, kind of looks like the one that we were looking at earlier, right? So a header, a nav, a main section with content, and a footer. And then they kind of like show you what the target is for the day. This is what you guys are trying to build, right? Looks a lot like something we've done already, right? A lot of this fits in there. And then they give you a step-by-step. So for example, it says you have 3 tasks: create a folder for the Java Jam website, create the home page, create the menu page, right? Very similar to what we did here in class. So then they go into tasks and they start walking you through it. Create a folder on your hard drive or portable storage called Java Jam to contain your files, right? Get the home page or get your editor going to create a rough home page. And then they tell you what to put in for the title, et cetera, et cetera. And then basically what they do is they walk you through every part of it. So they step you through. So it's step 1, modify the page title and put in, yada, yada. Wireframe the main content, et cetera. And they tell you all the content to put in. And then you just keep following the instructions until you get to the end. So there's not really a lot to do. And you kind of have a target of what it should look like. And then when you're all done, that's all going to be in a folder. So on your own machine, for example, I would put all my Java Jam stuff in my Java Jam folder. And that's going to be 2 files, index and menu. And then I will upload those to Prometheus, submit a link, and then ideally also zip it and provide the files just in case. Now, another good idea to submit the zip version is if your link's not working or you didn't upload it right, then I still have something to grade, right? And on the early assignments, I kind of don't care as much as the later assignments, but all those parts are important. If for whatever reason, you're in a situation where, and I'm trying to get back to the course shell here, you might not have the book yet and you need the case study, because if you don't have the book, you're not seeing the case study. I included a link here to the case study instructions. I don't think it's for all of them, but I think it's for at least Java Jam. See, I'm kind of going through it really quick. And Fish Creek. So those 2 are here. So if you don't have the book yet, you're in luck. You have the instructions here. This is the only unit I do that for, though. Otherwise, you really do need the book, to do these. When this is all said and done, so now I'm not going to give you the answers yet, right? Because I want you, believe it or not, the struggle through it is kind of a good thing, right? To struggle with it, maybe not get it quite right, and then figure it out in the aftermath. But what will happen, and I know I have them on the Apollo server, and I might still link to there, but right here on the Apollo server, I have all the solutions, right? And I'm going to put this on Prometheus pretty soon too. But notice what I do is I give you all the solutions for all the case studies all the way through the book, right? Here's the thinking on this. Some people will come in here, try to copy it and turn that in, not realizing I can figure that out, that you're doing that. But the idea is that when you create, let's say Java Jam, right? For chapter 2, this is what it looks like. This is the author's solution. You might do it and you might get a couple little things wrong, usually pretty small things for most people. And I'll give you some notes on that. And then I'll go, here, check out the author's solution. I'll give you the link to it. And you can come in here, you can just right click, view source, and take a look and go, oh, that's what he meant. It's like they wanted me to do this instead of that. And here's the solution. And this will be true for all the case studies. So I will give you the solutions. And then I usually release them in Unit 3, which is about to be released. And that way, whenever you do a case study, before you turn it in, you can check it yourself and fix it yourself, right? And then know what you're doing right. And now why that's important is because as you move from one chapter to the other in the book, each chapter builds on the previous. So the chapter 3 work assumes that all your chapter 2 work is correct. And chapter 3 assumes, or chapter 4 assumes all the chapter 3 stuff is correct. And if you're building on something that's broken, you end up with a pretty broken result at the end. if you're working off the correct code base, then everything will work, right? And so it's kind of like self-drill and practice, and solutions will be provided, right? And then you can check your own work. And then where you really kind of like spread your wings and fly is when you do the personal project stuff, where you can try stuff way beyond the scope of what's here and really kind of shoot for something better. All right. Any questions on how to do any of that? You guys cool? All right. So I kind of gave you a basic lay of the land, and if you really want the Apollo link, you know, I mean, I'm not afraid to give it now. I mean, this is basically it. But I'm going to be moving a lot of this content over to Prometheus. I think I maybe have moved it already, but I have to check all the links to make sure they're okay. I think they need updating. But there's the case study solutions on Apollo. This is for version 10 of the text. And then what I'll do is I'll put this all on Prometheus, and then I'll put all my personal demonstrations added to that as well. So like all the stuff I do in the videos or in the classroom, you will also see on the website. All right, if you guys are all good, let's call it a day. Ended 12 minutes early. Still got a whole days of instruction in. All right, folks, I will see you next week.